Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Ben 10 crossover retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing the second televised crossover that Ben 10 has taken part in, T.G.I.S. And just as with last week, before we get to talking about the actual episode, we are going to talk about the shows that were involved in it. And since, of course, like I said, this is the Ben 10 crossover retrospectives, we'll focus on the Ben 10 side first. And for this crossover, the Ben 10 show that's represented is the fourth series, Ben 10 Omniverse. I have briefly talked about it in the past, but not really in great detail, so I'll just kind of go over more here. Ben 10 Omniverse, well, like I said, was the fourth series, and it takes place immediately following the end of Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. Ben is no longer armed with the Ultimatrix, and instead has a brand new Omnitrix provided to him by Azimuth, which pretty much gives him access to every single alien he's had before, plus a few new ones. He still is a celebrity, and he still works for the plumbers, but at the beginning of the series, Gwen and Kevin kind of left. Gwen went off to college, and since she and Kevin were dating, he went off after her. They're not, as a result, Ben is now partnered with a new character, a plumber recruit named Rook Blanco, who's essentially meant to be the straight man to Ben's antics, so to speak, as he's deeply serious, doesn't really get a lot of Ben's jokes and antics, and overall is just meant to be kind of a slight stick in the mud. He's not a bad character, but meant to just be the straight man to Ben's antics. Ultimately, the premise of the show is just a lot similar to Ultimate Alien minus the ultimate forms, but a major thing with the show is that it tried reintroducing more of the zany side of Ben 10. Tried to essentially, remember how one of the things I complimented the classic Ben 10 series for was how it was kind of creatively stupid, and I mean like the fun, and I mean that in the fun kind of stupid. Like it embraced classic comic book superheroics and just went all the way with it. It felt like they were trying to do that with Omniverse as well, but in my opinion, they didn't fully grasp it. Omniverse was unfortunately for me the series that kind of got me out of Ben 10. Like it didn't kill the Ben 10 fan in me as I'm still an avid fan of the series, but it did stop me from being a regular watcher. Just for me, Omniverse felt like it was kind of a mishmash. It was hit or miss, just kind of mixed. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There were times when the humor actually was funny, other times when it felt like they were trying too hard. Or sometimes when they tried to be as serious as they were in the previous two series, and it just kind of wound up clashing. And as a result, the series just kind of was a mishmash of styles. And unfortunately, it didn't always work. And those problems also went to Ben too, as this series I think was the zenith of Ben kind of being annoying. As sometimes he actually did seem to have his head on straight and was serious. Sometimes he was lovably goofy and and was able to find ways to get around situations. Other times, though, he could be kind of annoying. So, yeah. Again, though, it was kind of hit or miss at the end of the day. There were parts of Omniverse that I felt did work, and there were episodes that I feel were not only creative but genuinely good. And some of them did draw me back in to want to revisit the show even after I stopped watching, like the story arc with Albedo coming back. And yes, I'm aware that it's pronounced Albedo in Omniverse. I'm still going to keep calling him Albedo because that's how it was originally pronounced. So apologies if you prefer the other one. That's your preference. I have mine, so sorry. But I liked that. I liked that there was an arc involving multiple Bens from different realities coming together. I thought that was really cool. I liked the introduction of a version of Ben called Ben 23. There was still some creative stuff in Omniverse. There was still some stuff that made me scratch my head, and as I mentioned in previous vlogs, the Omniverse did try to patch up some of the plot holes that previous series wound up opening. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up my vlog on the Alien Force episode Vendetta. I have a rant at the end of that video about that. For me though, the show was just hit or miss and was just a major mixed bag. There were aspects of it that worked, aspects of it that didn't, but at the end of the day, it was also the show that made me stop watching, so I don't know. If you're a fan of it, good for you, kudos, I'm glad you enjoy it, but yeah, the show for me was just mixed, so sorry. But That's just the Ben 10 side. What about the other side? What's the other side of the crossover? Well, in this case, this is actually for a Cartoon Network show that even at the time of this episode was done. The second show that was involved in this crossover was a show called The Secret Saturdays. The premise of The Secret Saturdays was that it involved a family of cryptozoologists called, well, the Saturdays. They were and basically how the show worked was that they were trying to find an ancient cryptid, this called Kerr, which had the power to control almost all the other cryptids, which cryptids are these, if you don't know, are meant to be like these weird, strange, weird animals that many people consider like supernatural, like, Bigfoot or something. But essentially, the thing is, they weren't the only ones looking for Kerr. The main villain of the show was this TV host named V.V. Argost, who wanted to seek out Kerr so that he could gain control of Kerr's powers and take control of a cryptid army to, well, take over the world. As such, the show was essentially just both sides trying to outmaneuver the other to try and find clues to Kerr's location, while also dealing with whatever new threat came up, dealing with maybe a new cryptid, maybe a new piece of the puzzle, maybe just some wacky adventures. There were actually a couple episodes where the Saturdays met their antimatter doubles from a parallel universe that they called the Mondays. So I thought that was really cool, and I liked that. And it was ultimately Secret Saturdays is actually a really creative show. It lasted for 2 seasons with a total of 26 episodes, I think. But it was actually a really interesting and really fun show, which I do recommend checking out if you haven't heard of it. So it's it's really fun, really creative, definitely worth checking out. But like I said, the show had actually been off the air for at least a little while prior to this crossover happening. So, and the thing is, when this crossover first came out, I didn't even hear of it. Like I said, Omniverse was the last Ben 10 show I regularly watched, and I stopped watching after a certain point. Specifically, the incursion invasion of Earth storyline. That was kind of where I stopped caring and just kind of went off to look at other things. And as a result of that, I missed this crossover whenever it came out, and I only learned about it later via articles online. And I'm like, wait, there was a crossover between the Secret Saturdays and Ben 10? That sounds kind of cool. I would like to see that. And would you believe that I have never actually seen this episode until today? That's not a joke. I have never actually sat down and watched this episode before doing this specific vlog. So this was kind of a new experience for me, but at the same time, I was a little interested in what they were going to do. I was interested in what they were going to do and how they would execute it, like how would they introduce the Saturdays into Ben 10's world, likewise how would Ben get used to the cryptid thing since he deals with aliens, what brings them together, etc. So, yeah, I was genuinely interested, and honestly, if I wasn't doing the vlogs, I would have checked this episode out eventually, so. But with that all said, though, does the episode deliver? Is it a good representation? Is it a good crossover between these two similar but different franchises? Well, let's get to the story. Well, let's get to the story. Essentially, what kicks off the plot is that Komodo dragons have been seen around Bellwood, and basically wherever they show up, they attack either humans or aliens alike. As in Omniverse, it was revealed that there was like a secret underground alien city beneath Bellwood that was called, well, Undertown. And yeah, the Komodo dragons have been attacking denizens of above and below. So, and basically anyone they attack is drained of their life force and turned to stone. As a result of this, and because of the Komodo dragons, the Saturdays are called in because apparently they're old affiliates of Max, which is odd but believable. And and something I kind of find interesting too is that, unlike with last week's crossover where Ben 10 and Generator Rex were shown to exist in their own separate continuities, they established very early in the episode that Secret Saturdays and Ben 10 take place in the same universe, which honestly, I think is believable. Because the thing is, in Ben 10, we've seen a lot of strange stuff. We've seen an ancient Mayan god protecting a magical sword. We've seen alternate dimensions powered by magic. We've seen aliens of energy that came to Earth with powers that could be similar to magic, but so yeah, I buy that they could probably take place in the same universe, and I could buy the plumbers would probably be aware of the Saturdays. So yeah, like I said, chupacabras, and so Saturdays are called in, and they end up running into Ben while he's dealing with one of the chupacabras. As such, both sides when both sides meet, they're both actually aware of each other. The Saturdays are more aware of Ben because, well, he's still a famous superhero, but Ben has only just heard of the Saturdays. His grandpa's probably mentioned them maybe once or twice as they're affiliates of his, because Ben is a part of the Plumbers, so I could actually buy that, but at the same time, I do kind of find that amusing, but it does open up both sides to wanting to get to know each other and want to know what's going on. However, as such, when both sides do eventually meet, they get introductions out of the way, but unfortunately, when they do meet, it's too little too... Sorry, dry throat. It's too little too late, as they're just at a site where there's a chupacabra attack, and unfortunately the latest victim is made of stone. As such, not really having the facilities to take care of this person here, the Saturdays call in their airship, because they have an airship, and they bring the guy back up to the ship with Ben and Rook tagging along. As such, Ben kind of marvels at the airship and everything in there. Zack introduces him to all the ship's the denizens of the airship, including Komodo and their pterodactyl, who Zahn. His name is Zahn. Sorry, it's been a while since I've seen the Secret Saturdays, so I apologize if some of my knowledge of the show is rusty. And of course, Zack also introduces him to his mom, and yeah, Ben starts crushing immediately. Also Fisk, yeah. Ben also met Fisk. But the mom is the most important part, because, like I said, Ben just starts crushing on her immediately, and yeah, I should probably mention this. Because the Saturdays are appearing in Ben 10 Omniverse, their designs are changed. Kind of like how in the crossover last week when Ben went to the Generator Rex universe and his design was slightly altered to match the animation style of that show, the Saturdays designs and animations are altered to match Ben 10 Omniverse. However, because Omniverse likes to redesign stuff, their designs are also changed as well. Zack, instead of Zack having his regular shirt with a Saturday S on it, he's now in full body armor. Doc and Drew are also now wearing armor as well. And oh yeah, by the way, Drew is a lot more sexy. Yeah, Drew Saturday in the original show was definitely kind of a bombshell. They definitely made her to look to be, I guess I should say it, a MILF. And in this show, they kind of push it a little further. She looks a little bit skinnier. Her chest is a little more emphasized. Her hair is braided back instead of falling over. It's just they clearly designed her to look a lot more sexy, and Ben falls for it, which of course gets Zack's chagrin. But 90% of the time, Ben is still cool. So he brings Ben back to his room so they can to try and trade information. Ben, of course, is just kind of in awe of all this, but Zack starts kind of filling them in on their world, how they not only protect humans from cryptids and cryptids from humans, but they also protect cryptids from humans. That there are people who would like to exploit them or take advantage of them. And one primary example he brings up is V.V. Argost, which also gives Zack an excuse to open up a web page for Argost's show Weird World. As part of the thing with Secret Saturdays was that V.V. Argost had his own show, and while Zack knew that Argost was the bad guy and wanted to take over the world, he still loved the show and tuned into it regularly. As such, Ben actually asks whatever happened to Argost because he disappeared, and Zack admits that Argost was destroyed. And I should probably get into that because just in case no one here has watched Secret Saturdays, and spoilers, it's a major one. At the end of the Secret Saturdays, it was revealed that Kerr the whole time was Zack Saturday, as in the show, Zack had kind of these strange powers. It allowed him to essentially communicate with cryptids, pretty much make them do what he wanted, or, well, not really control them, just kind of convince them. And and it was at the end of the series, it was revealed that those powers were actually a sign of Kerr, which meant that that Zack was Kerr the whole time. As such, when Argost learned this, he wanted to try and get Zack's power, but he got greedy. The thing is, remember how I mentioned how one of the Secret Saturdays episodes dealt with them meeting their antimatter counterparts from a mirror universe? Argost went after that Zack first. Like, he went to Zack Monday and stole his Kerr powers, and then he went after Zack. And ultimately, he was successful. He managed to steal Zack's powers, but the thing is, matter and antimatter just don't mix. And the thing is, whenever the Saturdays and the Mondays fought, it always caused reality around them to get wonky, since these were two oppositely charged, because since the Saturdays are positive matter, the Mondays were antimatter. So so just them being in the same area together caused reality to get wonky and get weird. As such, with having two sets of Kerr powers in him, positive and negative, it tore Argost apart from the inside and destroyed him. So that's a thing. Back to the plot. Zack assures them that he's gone and that he's not a threat anymore. But while they're still talking before he can get to the specifics of Argost's demise, the airship sets off an alarm that shows that there's an attack in Undertown that involves the Chupacabras. Pretty much the Saturdays Ben and Rook go to Undertown to deal with it, and they're attacking this market for a guy named, I think, Mr. Bowman. There's who's essentially just this guy who owns these various shops, and there's a running gag where Ben continuously trashes his place. It's honestly not that funny, but essentially the Chupacabras are attacking his store and the denizens. And while the Saturdays Ben are able to fend them off, there is one thing of note about the Chupacabras that seems interesting. To see, every time we see them, they all clearly have these strange metal cylinders attached to them. And when Ben first met Zack at Zack and Co., Doc Saturday pulled up an image of the Chupacabra on this little handheld he had, and they definitely match what the creatures look like, but they don't have the metal cylinders, and so when Zack is able to get close, when they're able to grab one of the Chupacabras, Zack is able to get in close, and it turns out that he still has some excess power. So he's able to at least look into the creature's mind, and he realizes it doesn't want to do this. Someone is forcing it. But unfortunately, that's all the information he can get before the creature manages to break away and escape with its friends. As such, the group was wondering who's probably behind this, and sure enough, we cut to another location and learn that the culprit is Dr. Animo. I was happy. I was really happy to see this. And it turns out that there is a reason he's stealing life force. You see, Dr. Animo has a machine in this little lab, a very big one, and he's been sending the Chupacabras out to steal life force to funnel into the machine. Of course, as such, with this latest attack, he now has enough life force to get the machine up and running, and when he turns it on, what's inside that he's been feeding life force into? The Argost, who is just as hammy here as he was in the Secret Saturdays, which I should probably address the elephant in the room here and now. None of these Secret Saturdays voice actors come back. Well, almost. That's part of the reason why I'm bringing this up. But yeah, none of the original VAs for the Saturday family come back to reprise their roles. They're all different voice actors, which was a little off-putting, but you do get used to it, especially in Zack's case, because this does take place sometime after the original series. But the only voice actor that came back that was originally that they brought back from the Secret Saturdays was Argost's voice actor, and oh my god, I love him. I still love him. Argost is a great villain. He's a master manipulator, but he's also a classical ham like Dr. Animo. And so seeing him brought back is honestly just fun, especially seeing him and Dr. Animo work off each other. It's great. However, he doesn't come back exactly as he died, as it turns out that Animo kind of made some alterations to him as a body, kind of making him a Franken-cryptid, as he called him. Like he has a dragon arm, a tail, wings, etc. etc. He's a lot buffer now. Argost is at first a little aghast at this, but as the episode goes on, he takes the body more and more and thinks, you know what, I can deal with this. And on top of that, it turns out this machine that Animo used to bring Argost back was actually Argost's design himself. It turns out that when VV Argost went to capture Zack at the end of the Secret Saturdays, he had a backup plan in mind. He knew that there was a possibility that he would die, and it turns out that in the event of that, he had blueprints for this machine made and sent to Dr. Animo. And so ever since the Animo built the machine, he's been trying to gather life force to bring Argost back. For 3 years. Something that Argost is even aghast at because it was supposed to take a month. And as such, Animo says he did intend for it to be a month, but because of interference from outside forces, aka Ben Tennyson, it kind of put a delay in his work, which I don't completely buy, because, if we believe that this episode takes place 3 years after the events of the Secret Saturdays, then that means there was at least 1 year where Ben was inactive. Then Animo took a brief stint at becoming devoid in the Null Void, which honestly I could see Animo pretty much saying screw that to Argost's resurrection plan in favor of his plan to take control of the Null Guardians and take over the world. So that's kind of Animo's B. And then on top of that, after that, he goes back to B. On top of that, there's Ultimate Alien, where he's back to doing his regular shenanigans. So yeah, Animo's kind of full of it. But with that being said, but you could also make the argument that through all that, he was probably working to try and bring Argost back behind the scenes. So I don't know. So maybe Animo was doing it in his spare time. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe sometimes he abandoned the plan for other things and then just kept coming back to it when he thought, maybe he could help me. But so whatever. Bottom line, I think he's full of it in him blaming Ben Tennyson. As such, with that out of the way, Argost decides that he wants to try and flex his new body out, and so he goes out into Undertown and begins raiding it, which gets the attention of Ben, Zack, and Co. The instant when Zack sees Argost, he's able to recognize him because, of Argost's mask, and, Argost recognizes Zack, and, Argost does have a beef with the kid that technically killed him, and as such, they're able to... Again, dry throat, I apologize. Actually, you know what, hold on a second. Sorry about that, got a drink. But anyway, yeah. Ben, Zack, and Co. end up fighting Argost, and I don't remember how the battle goes, but it does end in Argost retreating, with Animo pretty much chastising him for flexing his body in a public space, as the group now realizes that Argost is alive and is probably coming to screw with their lives. When Argost returns to Animo's base, he chastises Animo for pulling him back, but Animo does mention how he served him loyally, and it turns out that he wasn't just working on Argost's body through all this, as he turns on the lights to his lab, and it turns out he has an entire army of Franken-cryptids. As such, which Animo thinks that he and Argost could use to, take over the world. Argost, of course, wonders, you do know that cryptids are hard to control. How do you plan to use them? To which Animo replies, Animo says that he's kind of got a plan for that. As the thing is, part of Animo's design is that his brain now is in a jar on his head. But the thing is, how he's been able to control the chupacabras is through these little antennas that he has attached to his chrome dome, so to speak. Unfortunately, though, they only have so much power. But that's where Argost comes in. You see, just as Zack was able to keep some residual Kerr power after Argost died, it turns out that Argost still has some residual anti-Kerr power in his body. So with his added boost from all the life force that Animo fueled into him, Argost can now control the Franken-Kerrs, which he immediately does, and as you do, he's ready to cause some mayhem. As such, back with Ben, Zack, and Co., they're trying to do their best to search for Animo's lab, and with Zack's powers, they're able to find it, but by the time they get there, they realize that the Animo and Argost have flown the coop and left a Franken-Cryptid to fight the group. they're able to take care of it, but they're of course wondering, well, where are they? Until they get an alert and find that Argost is attacking the Saturday's airship with the Franken cryptids. They manage to get. Thankfully, Doc and Drew managed to get out of there in time as well, along with their patients, plus Zahn and Komodo also. But so the instant Argost learns that the Saturdays are not on the ship, he sends his army to attack them on the street, resulting in a massive brawl between all sides. Animo, of course, decides to try and take advantage of the situation by having his little chupacabras try and take Fiskerton, but that plan doesn't really go anywhere because its armies of little chupacabras against this big burly creature. So yeah, this is not exactly. So yeah, it's kind of a losing battle to the point where Animo ends up interrupting Argost as he's fighting Zack to try and tell him, "Hey, can you help me out with this?" And Argost pretty much tells him to screw himself. And on top of that, Animo kind of gets taken out easily as Komodo managed to come in and destroys those little antennae on his head, so his control of the chupacabras is kind of null. But unfortunately, that still is not enough to stop Argost, as he's still a major threat in his body, and he is wiping the floor with Zack and co. Ben comes in and manages to help Zack fend off Argost enough, and he and Zack manage to form a kind of a quick plan to take down Argost, as well. Argost's body is still fueled by all the life force that Dr. Animo stole from all those people, and so they think if they can funnel that energy out of Argost's body, then they can take it out, which makes Ben smile because he's got just the perfect alien for the job. As such, while Zack is able to distract Argost, Ben is able to sneak in from behind and transforms into one of the aliens that was introduced in Omniverse, Feedback, an alien who has the power to essentially absorb and channel energy, whether it be electrical, magical, or otherwise. And so he's able to use his these antennae plugs on his head, and he manages to pretty much attach to Argost's bolts, and through them he's able to absorb the life force energy from Argost's body, and well, causes him to drop dead. As such, Ben ends up funneling the life energy out into the sky, which presumably cures the people that they drain the energy from. At least I hope, because if not, then that means those people are stoned forever. And the episode ends with the plumbers coming in to take Animo away, and Zack asking for a selfie between him and Ben. So it's cute. So yeah, that's nice. So overall, I think the episode's all right. It's definitely in the same vein of fun as Heroes United, and as it takes a lot of what works from both the Secret Saturdays and Ben 10 Omniverse and puts them together into one episode. And like with Heroes United, Ben and Zack work well off of each other, as they're both technically kid superheroes who are kind of the attitudes of both of their respective franchises, with Ben kind of being mouthy and a bit and kind of show-offish, but ultimately still a good person at heart. And Zack, on Zack's side, while he had a mouth too, but because he was a kid in a family of cryptozoologists that fought all these strange creatures, he also could have fun with what he was doing and definitely enjoyed himself. And so him and Ben definitely work well off of each other and have good chemistry In battle, they're able to coordinate well. Outside of battle, they're able to exchange information and kind of quip about each of the strangeness of their lives. That's nice. And on top of that, it's really cool to see. It's one of the things that I think really does work about the episode. It's actually, for starters, it's the threats. I love that. Unlike Heroes United, where the threat was primarily something from one side of the crossover, here it actually is something that concerns both sides, because it's actually rather interesting, because this is something that would get both sides to come together. Because chupacabras are cryptids. They're something so they would fall into the Secret Saturdays purview. But with the way they're being used to attack ordinary citizens, suck out their life force in both Undertown and Bellwood, that's a way for Ben to get involved as well. And add on that they're all being controlled by Dr. Animo, who's using the excess life force that they're stealing to revive the big bad from the Secret Saturdays. then yeah, that's actually really nice. It's actually cool seeing them both, seeing not just the heroes from both franchises intermingling, but their threats as well. And again, no beef against Alpha from the Heroes United. He was still he was still an appropriately fun and creepy villain. Definitely kind of not. Definitely was nice, but again, my main complaint with him was that he still felt like a Generator Rex centric villain, where with only like the minorest of ties to Ben 10. Whereas here you have threats from both sides of the crossover coming together, which ultimately constitutes having both teams come together to try and find a way to stop it. So I like that. I like seeing that. And speaking of which, of the threats, I love seeing Argost and Dr. Animo work off each other. Dr. Animo was one of my favorite villains in Ben 10, and honestly, he worked in Omniverse as well. He was just as hammy, just as over the top, just as fun as he was in previous series. And so to have him in the same room as Vivi Argost, who was the big bad of the Secret Saturdays, but was just as hammy and just kind of as scenery chewing as Animo, but with enough but with the grandiosity and presence to back it up. It's really fun. It's fun to see them bicker. It's fun to see Argost kind of get disgusted at Animo and just kind of get shocked when Animo tells him it's been 3 years since he died. He's like, what? It's just kind of fun. It's nice seeing Argost chew the scenery and Animo doing his usual scheming and being over the top, thinking he's the big bad when Argost is honestly the bigger threat here, especially since Animo gave him his Franken Kerr body, which ultimately, I think which I do kind of consider a minor flaw, especially as the episode goes on, Animo does get sidelined. But again, it's still kind of fun to see them work off each other. And while does annoy me that that most of the original VAs from Secret Saturdays didn't come back to reprise their roles, I am glad they got the original VA for Vivi Argost. He fits the role perfectly. It definitely belongs to him. And if someone else tried to imitate him, it might have been funny, but it wouldn't have felt right. So, yeah, I'm glad for that. On top of that, speaking of the chemistry between the villains, the humor in this episode was mostly fine. The jokes in the episode mostly came from just Ben's reactions to the Saturday's world, because the episode kind of mostly had Ben be kind of the wide-eyed kid in this episode. Whereas while Zach definitely is clearly having a lot more fun as well, Ben definitely kind of seems to get a little more distracted in the episode, especially when it comes to Drew Saturday, which, I'm sorry to say this, that joke wasn't funny. That was not a funny running gag. It was actually kind of annoying and rather stupid. Which, to be fair, Drew Saturday is attractive, but there's a time and place. There is very much a time and place in Ben, so I think maybe you should rein your hormones in, especially because she's a married woman and you're working alongside her son. And yeah, Zach sees Ben having the hots for his mom too, and every time he sees it, it's like, dude, that's my mom. That's like, yeah, that's just like a little weird and kind of creepy. But again, most of the humor does seem to come from the interactions between Argost and Animo, so I think that kind of evens it out. But I feel like there are still some minor. But while I do think the episode is fun, what keeps it all right for me, at least, is that there are some aspects of it that don't feel fully realized, if that makes any sense. Like, remember how last week I kind of complained how Ben and Rex, while having some moments, felt they should have had more? That's the same case in this special as well. While Ben and Zach definitely work well off of each other as kid superheroes, they don't really have a lot of moments, so to speak. They don't really have moments where they just sit down and talk. At best, most of the stuff is just them comparing situations or marveling at how their jobs operate. Like the fun of it, like how things work. Zach giving Ben information about how their show is and how the Saturdays operate. Whereas anytime Zach asks any questions for Ben doesn't really give enough info. Like at one point, Zach talks about this weapon he has called about his powers, how they work, and all the stuff behind them, and then Zach asks Ben how the Omnitrix works, and instead of Ben talking about how the Omnitrix is this super advanced piece of alien technology, he just talks about how it feels like it's out to get him at times, and how it's kind of stupid, which honestly just kind of feels dumb. Because I feel like that we could have those moments where Ben and Zach actually should share more about how things work, which I know that stuff like that, what I just mentioned, was meant to be for people who are just Ben 10 fans and never checked out Secret Saturdays. And since this is an episode of Ben 10 Omniverse, you obviously don't really need to be caught up to speed on the Ben 10 situation because this is an episode of Ben 10. You don't really need to be updated on things you already know. And if you've at least gotten to this point, you should be at least somewhat familiar with the franchise. Although I would also argue that maybe they should still get like minor stuff in case there are any Secret Saturdays fans that learned this episode and want to check it out. Because there are times in crossovers when that's the case, where someone who's not a fan of one franchise that comes in because they're crossing over with another. Because that's happened to me before. And there have been crossovers where they have at least given the basic situation of that franchise. So I feel like they should have still done that with this one. So I'm gonna make that another point against it. And another thing I mentioned about that is, along with that because of the lack of character moments between Ben and Zach and vice versa, there's not really a lot of development on their parts. Because like with Ben kind of having like a forced character problem in Heroes United, Zach has a similar thing in this episode, as he talks about how because the Saturdays have to do what they do in secret, Zach's heroics are not publicized like Ben's are. As such, any major things that he does, any major problems he helps solve, his involvement has to be swept under the rug because the world should not know what cryptids are. They cannot know. They should never know. And so as a result, Zach does lament how he has to just kind of hide this part of his life from people. But just like with Ben's lament about how he may never get home and that he's cut off from everyone he knows and loves in Heroes United, Zach's conflict doesn't really add much to anything. And it only gets touched on like at the end of the episode after they beat Argost and Animo. And of course the media shows up and Ben just talks to him. It's like, hey, the media's here. You could probably get that credit you wanted. And Zach talks about, no, I don't do it for the credits. Like, okay, that's good for you. When did you come to that conclusion? I thought you were lamenting about it earlier in the episode. So, I don't know. That's just kind of dumb. I'm just going to kind of call that dumb. So, I do kind of put that as a point against the episode. It does feel like that Ben and Zach should have had more character moments. And what? So, yeah, that's another problem. And I already mentioned how there are some jokes that don't fly, like Ben in this episode, while being mostly competent, does have his moments where I did kind of cringe, like with him crushing on Drew Saturday, or him being kind of the big doofus in the room, because yeah, even Zach's more qualified than this. And there's like and going back to the scene where Ben, Zach, and Co break into Animo's lab, they find old blueprints for Argos' machine, and Ben of course, and Fiskerton is there, and so Ben goes up to Fisk and says, "It's like, it's okay, I don't get this either." And Fisk, because Ben's been annoying him the whole episode, immediately shows that he does fully understand this as he reads the machine, figures out how it works, and then the instant Ben realizes that he's actually intelligent, Fisk just kind of smirks at him. Like, that actually, I'll admit that one was funny. But again, it was kind of relied on Ben being an idiot, which, again, that's still a problem for me, because future shows do seem to forget that Ben is not stupid. Yeah, he's not book smart, but he is street smart. Hold on a second. Sorry. So, he does know stuff, and he can pick up on stuff. It's just, for some reason, they more emphasize the doofus aspect of his personality, which, that's another reason why Omniverse got to me. They sometimes had him be a doofus, sometimes they had him be capable. I don't know. I don't know. So, yeah, I'll consider that like a minor problem. But, hold on one more time. Sorry, dog. But yeah, that I think was kind of a minor problem. And again, I think the last thing that kind of got to me is because of I think it's also the fight scenes. Like, the fight scenes aren't bad in this episode, but I also feel like they could be more impressive, and I have seen more impressive stuff from Ben 10, especially in Omniverse, and while it is still cool to see both sides kind of working well off of each other, because Ben and Zach are kind of close in skill, especially since while Zach does still technically have powers, they're not like Ben, so he does have to rely on actual skill plus his weapons, which, by the way, I like the design for the claw in this episode. It's not a staff anymore. It's like a staff gun combo, which I think is cool. And of course, there's the stuff with Fiskerton and Rook. The fight scenes aren't bad. They're not bad, but they do feel like they could be better. I'm just saying. So I feel like the fight scenes are slightly underwhelming. Not bad, but just slightly underwhelming. Like, they could be better. And of course, because the lack of character moments, the story does. And because of the more action-oriented stuff, the story does feel kind of rushed in a couple areas. Not enough to annoy me, but enough that it is slightly noticeable. So I am gonna knock that against the episode. So, but like I said, as a whole, T.G.I.S is not bad. It is not a bad episode. It is, but at the end of the day, it's just a fun little jaunt between these two different franchises, and seeing them, and like with last week, just seeing them come together and work off each other. The jokes can be hit or miss, but the ones that are legitimately funny actually do get a chuckle out of me. The characters are on point and really nice, save for Ben in a couple areas. The action is all right, but not great. The villains are actually really cool and really fun to and work off each other well. There are still some good story beats, and while there are both sides do work well off each other, and both are able to, and both come together perfectly. I like while Zach's whole character thing about not getting credit is kind of glossed over, though the interactions between him and Ben are fun and do showcase how well they work off each other without making the other one look weak in terms of abilities, especially since it was them working together that ultimately defeated Argost. So I like that. Also, yeah, and the plan was also, yeah, Argost and Animo's plans were definitely kind of fun. So I like that. So overall, the episode is all right. Not perfect, not great, but definitely all right. Like I said, it's a fun little jaunt. Just cool to revisit the Secret Saturdays, especially in a more modern setting. Nice to see them work off Ben and be a part of his world. So yeah, overall, definitely a fun episode, worth checking out if you're interested. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and for next week, we're going to be seeing Ben 10 crossover with not one, not two, but 3 other Cartoon Network shows as we see an episode that celebrates a lot of Cartoon Network's history in OK Ben, Let's Go Universe Crossover Nexus.